The Phoenix Crown, A Tale of Aurelia. The griffins arrived at dawn, their golden feathers catching the first light like scattered coins across the sky. Sera watched from her tower window as they circled the palace 3 times, the formal pattern that announced royal visitors. Her heart quickened. She knew what this meant. "They've come for you," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Keeper Aldrich in her doorway, his weathered face grave beneath his silver beard. The old scholar had been her mentor since childhood, teaching the ancient languages and the secret ways of bonding with mythical creatures. "The council has decided, then?" Sera asked, though she already knew the answer. "Princess Seraphine of House Luminous, you are summoned to the capital. Prince Daemon has formally requested your presence at court." Aldrich's voice was carefully neutral, but Sera caught the warning in his eyes. She had never met Prince Daemon of House Nocturne, though his reputation preceded him like storm clouds. The realm of Aurelia had been divided for 3 generations, her family ruling the sunlit eastern provinces, his family controlling the shadow-touched western lands. The old king, Daemon's grandfather, had proposed a union to reunite the fractured kingdom. A political marriage. How perfectly medieval. "When do I leave?" she asked. "Within the hour, but Sera, be careful. The court at Midnight Spire is not like your home. There are forces at work there, old powers that have awakened, and not everyone wants this union to succeed." Before she could respond, a knock sounded at her door. A young page entered, bowing low. "Your Highness, your phoenix is ready." Sera's breath caught. "Emberwing? They're letting me bring her?" "Prince Daemon specifically requested it. He wishes to see the legendary Phoenix of Luminous for himself." That was unexpected. Phoenixes were sacred, bonded to their riders for life. For Daemon to request Emberwing's presence showed either respect or a deeper game she didn't yet understand. An hour later, Sera stood in the palace courtyard, her traveling cloak billowing in the wind. Emberwing perched on the carved phoenix stand, her crimson and gold plumage shimmering with inner fire. The bird was the size of a large eagle, but far more magnificent. Each feather seemed to contain a sunset, and her eyes held an ancient intelligence. "Ready, girl?" Sera murmured, running her fingers along Emberwing's neck. The phoenix trilled softly, a sound like wind chimes and crackling flames. The journey would take 3 days by griffin carriage, crossing from the sunlit provinces into the shadowlands. Sera settled into the cushioned interior of the sky carriage, watching her home disappear below. The rolling golden fields gave way to darker forests, and eventually to the perpetual twilight of the Western realm. Chapter 2. Midnight Spire. Midnight Spire rose from the landscape like a dagger of black glass. The palace was impossibly tall, its architecture defying natural law. Towers that twisted and spiraled, bridges that hung suspended by no visible means, walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As the griffin carriage descended, Sera noticed the dragons. They weren't the massive, destructive beasts of legend. These were sleek shadow drakes, smaller than horses but no less dangerous, their scales rippling with darkness. They perched on the palace towers like living gargoyles, and their eyes followed the carriage as it landed. A welcoming party waited in the courtyard. At its center stood a young man who could only be Prince Daemon. He was not what she expected. The rumors painted him as cruel, power-hungry, obsessed with dark magic. But the man before her was young, perhaps only a year or 2 older than her own 22 years, with sharp aristocratic features and eyes the color of storm clouds. His black hair was long enough to brush his shoulders, and he wore the formal regalia of House Nocturne, midnight blue trimmed with silver thread that seemed to move of its own accord. But it was his expression that surprised me most. He looked nervous. "Princess Seraphine," he bowed formally. "Welcome to Midnight Spire. I hope your journey was comfortable." "Prince Daemon," she curtsied, aware of dozens of eyes on them. "The journey was smooth, thank you, though I confess the shadow drakes are more impressive than our history suggested." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "They're curious about your phoenix.
We've never had a firebird within these walls." He gestured to where Emberwing had landed beside Sera, drawing gasps from the assembled courtiers. "She's magnificent." "Thank you. Emberwing is—" A sudden shriek cut through the air. One of the shadow drakes had launched itself from a tower, diving towards Emberwing with talons extended. Sera's hand flew to her throat, but before she could react, Daemon's arm shot out. "Nephis, halt!" he commanded, his voice carrying a resonance that made the air shiver. The shadow drake froze mid-flight, hovering impossibly in the air. Slowly, almost sheepishly, it retreated to its perch. "My apologies," Daemon said, and now Sera detected genuine embarrassment. Shadow drakes are territorial. Nephis meant no real harm. It was more of a greeting. "A greeting that involved claws?" Sera asked. "We have different customs here," he said, and the corner of his mouth.
The Phoenix Crown, a tale of Aurelia. The griffins arrived at dawn, their golden feathers catching the first light like scattered coins across the sky. Sera watched from her tower window as they circled the palace 3 times, the formal pattern that announced royal visitors. Her heart quickened. She knew what this meant. "They've come for you," said a voice behind her. She turned to find Keeper Aldrich in her doorway, his weathered face grave beneath his silver beard. The old scholar had been her mentor since childhood, teaching the ancient languages and the secret ways of bonding with mythical creatures. "The council has decided, then?" Sera asked, though she already knew the answer. "Princess Seraphine of House Luminous, you are summoned to the capital. Prince Daemon has formally requested your presence at court." Aldrich's voice was carefully neutral, but Sera caught the warning in his eyes. She had never met Prince Daemon of House Nocturne, though his reputation preceded him like storm clouds. The realm of Aurelia had been divided for 3 generations, her family ruling the sunlit eastern provinces, his family controlling the shadow-touched western lands. The old king, Daemon's grandfather, had proposed a union to reunite the fractured kingdom. A political marriage. How perfectly medieval. "When do I leave?" she asked. "Within the hour, but Sera, be careful. The court at Midnight Spire is not like your home. There are forces at work there, old powers that have awakened, and not everyone wants this union to succeed." Before she could respond, a knock sounded at her door. A young page entered, bowing low. "Your Highness, your phoenix is ready." Sera's breath caught. "Emberwing? They're letting me bring her?" "Prince Daemon specifically requested it. He wishes to see the legendary Phoenix of Luminous for himself." That was unexpected. Phoenixes were sacred, bonded to their riders for life. For Daemon to request Emberwing's presence showed either respect or a deeper game she didn't yet understand. An hour later, Sera stood in the palace courtyard, her traveling cloak billowing in the wind. Emberwing perched on the carved phoenix stand, her crimson and gold plumage shimmering with inner fire. The bird was the size of a large eagle, but far more magnificent. Each feather seemed to contain a sunset, and her eyes held an ancient intelligence. "Ready, girl?" Sera murmured, running her fingers along Emberwing's neck. The phoenix trilled softly, a sound like wind chimes and crackling flames. The journey would take 3 days by griffin carriage, crossing from the sunlit provinces into the Shadowlands. Sera settled into the cushioned interior of the sky carriage, watching her home disappear below. The rolling golden fields gave way to darker forests, and eventually to the perpetual twilight of the Western realm. Chapter 2. Midnight Spire. Midnight Spire rose from the landscape like a dagger of black glass. The palace was impossibly tall, its architecture defying natural law. Towers that twisted and spiraled, bridges that hung suspended by no visible means, walls that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As the griffin carriage descended, Sera noticed the dragons. They weren't the massive, destructive beasts of legend. These were sleek shadow drakes, smaller than horses but no less dangerous, their scales rippling with darkness. They perched on the palace towers like living gargoyles, and their eyes followed the carriage as it landed. A welcoming party waited in the courtyard.
At its center stood a young man who could only be Prince Daemon. He was not what she expected. The rumors painted him as cruel, power-hungry, obsessed with dark magic, but the man before her was young, perhaps only a year or two older than her own 22 years, with sharp aristocratic features and eyes the color of storm clouds. His black hair was long enough to brush his shoulders, and he wore the formal regalia of House Nocturne, midnight blue trimmed with silver thread that seemed to move of its own accord. But it was his expression that surprised me most. He looked nervous. "Princess Seraphine," he bowed formally. "Welcome to Midnight Spire. I hope your journey was comfortable." "Prince Daemon," she curtsied, aware of dozens of eyes on them. "The journey was smooth, thank you, though I confess the shadow drakes are more impressive than our history suggested." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "They're curious about your phoenix. We've never had a fire."
Chapter 3: The Feast of Shadows. The Great Hall of Midnight Spire was unlike anything Sera had ever seen. The ceiling was enchanted to show the night sky, not the actual sky above them, but an impossible cosmic vista with constellations that had never existed, stars that pulsed with colored light, in a moon that slowly changed phases throughout the evening. Long tables stretched the length of the hall, set with black crystal and silver plate. Candles floated in mid-air, their flames casting shifting shadows that seemed almost alive. At the head table, Sera sat to Daemon's right, positioned as his honored guest and potential bride. "To Princess Seraphine," Daemon announced, raising his goblet, "may her light bring a new dawn to our shadowed realm." The assembled nobles raised their glasses, though Sera noticed several faces that held less than enthusiastic expressions. One in particular caught her attention, a woman in midnight silk, beautiful and sharp-featured, with calculating eyes that reminded Sera of a hunting hawk. "Who is that?" she asked Daemon quietly as the feast began. He followed her gaze. "Lady Morgana Blackthorn. She serves as my chief advisor on matters of magical defense, and before you ask, yes, she's opposed to our union." "Because she loves you?" The words were out before Sera could stop them. Daemon's expression flickered with surprise, then something that might have been amusement. "No, because she fears you." "Fears me?" "You're bonded to a phoenix, Seraphine. Do you know how rare that is? There hasn't been a phoenix rider in 3 generations, and phoenixes can't be corrupted. They burn away lies and deception." He leaned closer, his voice dropping. "In a court built on shadows and secrets, you're a walking source of truth. That makes you dangerous." Before Sera could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. A young man burst into the hall, his fine clothes disheveled, his face flushed with wine or passion, possibly both. "Daemon," he called out, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "Brother, still playing the dutiful prince, I see." "Lucian," Daemon said, his tone carefully controlled. "How good of you to join us." Lucian, Daemon's younger brother, Sera realized, swaggered toward the head table. He was handsome in a rakish way, with the same sharp features as Daemon, but none of the restraint. His eyes, when they fell on Sera, sparkled with mischief. "So this is the famous Phoenix Princess. Welcome to our humble home, Your Highness. I hope my brother has been the perfect gentleman." "He has," Sera said coolly. "How disappointing," Lucian grinned. "Daemon, you're becoming predictable. Where's the dangerous prince we all know and fear?" "Lucian, you're drunk. Go sleep it off," Daemon said flatly. "I'm celebrating the great Prince Daemon, brought to heel by a political marriage. It's poetic, really." Lucian grabbed a goblet from a nearby servant. "Tell me, princess, do you know what you're getting into? The secrets this palace holds? The things my dear brother has done in the name of duty?" "Enough." Daemon's voice cracked like a whip, and the temperature in the hall seemed to drop. The floating candles flickered, and the shadow drakes perched along the walls stirred restlessly. Lucian raised his hands in mock surrender. "As you command, Your Highness." He turned to leave, then paused. But Princess, ask him about the seer's prophecy. Ask him what really brought you here. He disappeared into the shadows, leaving a wake of uncomfortable silence. Daemon's jaw was tight, his knuckles white where he gripped his goblet. I apologize for my brother. He's complicated. What did he mean about a prophecy? It's nothing. Court superstition. Daemon, she touched his arm lightly, feeling him tense under her fingers. You asked for honesty. I'm asking for the same. He was quiet for a long moment, staring at his untouched plate. Finally he spoke, so quietly that only she could hear. 3 months ago, the court seer had a vision. She saw Aurelia consumed by darkness, a magical plague that would devour both our houses, leaving the kingdom in ruins. But she also saw a possibility of salvation, fire and shadow united, a bond that could heal the rift. He met her eyes. The union wasn't just my grandfather's idea, it was prophesied. Sera sat back, her mind reeling. You're saying I'm here because of a vision, not because of politics? Both, he said. The politics gave us an excuse, the prophecy gave us urgency. He hesitated, then added, but I want you to know, I would never have agreed to this if I thought it was just blind fate. I needed to believe there could be something real between us, something beyond duty. And do you believe that? His storm-gray eyes searched her face. I'm beginning to. The moments stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then Lady Morgana appeared at Daemon's elbow, her smile cold and perfect. Your Highness, the entertainment is ready to begin, unless you'd prefer to continue your private conversation. The pointed emphasis wasn't lost on Sera. She forced a smile. By all means, Lady Morgana, I'm eager to see what passes for entertainment in the Shadowlands. What followed was a spectacle unlike anything in the sunlit provinces. Shadow dancers performed impossible feats, their bodies seeming to merge with darkness itself. A unicorn with a coat like starlight was led through the hall, its presence causing the enchanted ceiling to shimmer with auroras. And finally, a young mage demonstrated the ancient art of dream weaving, creating illusions so vivid that Sera could have sworn she smelled the phantom roses that bloomed in midair. But through it all, she felt eyes upon her. Not just Daemon's, though she was acutely aware of his presence beside her, but others. Lady Morgana watched her with cold calculation. Several nobles whispered behind their hands, and somewhere in the shadows she caught a glimpse of Lucian, his expression unreadable. As the feast wound down, Daemon walked her back to her tower. The palace corridors were quieter now, lit by soft glowstones that cast no shadows. Your brother, Sera ventured. He seems troubled. Lucian has always been the wild one, Daemon answered. He resents that I'm firstborn, that I'll inherit the throne, but there's more to it than that. He paused at a window overlooking the courtyard, where Emberwing and several shadow drakes had apparently formed an uneasy alliance, sleeping in a pile of wings and scales. Our father died when Lucian was young. He never learned to control his power, and it frightens him, so he drinks and gambles and causes trouble. Anything to feel like he has control over something. You care about him, Sera observed. He's my brother, of course I care. His voice roughened, even when he's trying to sabotage everything I'm working towards. They reached her tower, but neither moved to say goodnight. The prophecy, Sera said, if this union fails, then darkness swallows the kingdom. Daemon's expression was bleak. No pressure, right? Despite everything, Sera laughed. The sound surprised both of them. I'm sorry, it's just this is possibly the worst foundation for a courtship in history. Arranged marriage, ancient prophecy, political conspiracy, and your brother actively trying to undermine us. When you put it that way, Daemon's lips twitched, we're doomed. Probably. Definitely. They both smiled, and suddenly the weight of expectation seemed a little lighter. Seraphine, Daemon said, his voice turning serious, I know this isn't what either of us wanted, but I promise you,
I will never force this. If you truly cannot bear the thought of our union, I'll find another way to fulfill the prophecy. Your happiness matters more than political convenience." The sincerity in his voice caught at her heart. Without thinking, she reached up and touched his cheek, feeling him still under her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "That means more than you know." For a heartbeat, she thought he might kiss her. She saw the desire flicker in his eyes, saw him lean slightly forward, but then he pulled back, control reasserting itself. "Good night, Princess," Daemon said softly. "Good night, Daemon." As she closed the door, Sera leaned against it, her heart racing. This was dangerous territory, not because Daemon was cruel or terrible, but because he was none of the things she had expected. He was thoughtful, burdened by duty, trying to do right by his people. She could fall for him, easily, and that terrified her more than any prophecy.
Chapter 4: Secrets and Spells. Sera woke to find Emberwing perched on her windowsill, agitated. The phoenix was making distressed sounds, her feathers rippling with anxious fire. "What is it, girl?" Sera asked, hurrying over. Emberwing launched herself into the air, circling the tower 3 times, the pattern for "follow me." Without hesitation, Sera dressed quickly and followed her phoenix through the labyrinthine corridors of Midnight Spire. The palace was different in early morning. The enchantment seemed sleepy, the shadows thinner. Emberwing led her deeper into the eastern wing, down a spiral staircase Sera hadn't noticed before. At the bottom was a door covered in wards, magical seals that glowed faintly with protective power. But someone had recently broken through them. The wards hung like torn spiderwebs, and the door stood slightly ajar. Sera's hand went to the small ceremonial dagger she carried, useless in a real fight, but reassuring nonetheless. She pushed the door open. Inside was a library, but not like any she'd seen before. The books here were ancient, bound in materials she couldn't identify. Some seemed to breathe, others whispered in languages she didn't recognize. And in the center of it all, hunched over a massive tome, was Lucian. He looked up as she entered, his eyes widening. "Princess, you shouldn't be here." "Neither should you, I suspect," Sera said, noting the broken wards. "What is this place?" Lucian stood, running a hand through his disheveled hair. In the morning light, he looked younger than he had at the feast, and more troubled. "The Forbidden Archives, books of dark magic, dangerous knowledge, things the council deemed too risky for general study. And you're reading them because," Lucian said bluntly, "because I'm trying to save my brother from making a terrible mistake." He gestured to the open tome. "This is the original seer's prophecy, the full version, not the sanitized summary they told you." Sera approached cautiously. The page showed an elaborate illustration, 2 figures intertwined, one wreathed in fire, one in shadow. But around them, barely visible, were other shapes, shadowy forms with hungry eyes. "The prophecy speaks of union," Lucian said, his voice tight, "but it also warns of the cost. Fire and shadow shall merge as one, but beware the darkness that feeds on light. The phoenix's flame may illuminate the way or consume all it touches." "What does that mean?" "I don't know, but Lady Morgana does." Lucian closed the book with a heavy thud. "She's been studying ancient binding magic, Princess, the kind that doesn't just unite people politically, it fuses their very souls, their magical essences. If you and Daemon complete the bonding ritual she's planning, there's no going back. You'll be linked forever, your powers intertwined." Sera's blood ran cold. "Does Daemon know this?" "I don't know what he knows anymore," Lucian said bitterly. "My brother keeps his own counsel, but I've heard Morgana whispering to him, filling his head with duty and destiny. She wants this binding because it will make him stronger, feed his shadow magic with your fire. But what happens to you?" He met her eyes. "What happens to a phoenix when it's forced into darkness?" Before Sera could answer, footsteps echoed in the stairwell. Lucian's eyes widened. "You need to go. If they find you here—" "Too late,"
said a cold voice. Lady Morgana stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 palace guards in shadow-blessed armor. Her beautiful face was calm, but her eyes glittered with malice. "Princess Seraphine, how unfortunate that you've discovered this place. And Prince Lucian, still meddling where you don't belong, I see." "Morgana," Lucian said, placing himself between Sera and the advisor, "let her go. This is between you and me." "On the contrary, this is about all of us, the prophecy, the kingdom, the future." Morgana stepped forward, and Sera felt the temperature drop. "Did you really think you could waltz into Midnight Spire and remain untouched by its shadows, Princess? This palace has stood for 1,000 years, and it has survived by consuming light." Sera felt Emberwing's presence above, circling outside the window. She reached for that connection, feeling the Phoenix's power respond to her call. "If you try to harm me, Lady Morgana, you'll answer to more than just Daemon. Phoenixes remember, and they never forgive." For a moment, genuine fear flickered across Morgana's face. Then her composure returned. "I have no intention of harming you, Princess. I merely wish to ensure you understand the stakes. The binding ritual must happen, the prophecy must be fulfilled, and any who stand in the way, well, accidents happen in ancient palaces." "That sounds like a threat," Sera said. "That's because it is one," Morgana replied pleasantly. "Now shall we discuss this over breakfast? I'm sure Prince Daemon is wondering where his betrothed has disappeared to."
Chapter 5. Truth and Consequences. Daemon found her in the Phoenix Roost, a glass-domed sanctuary atop the eastern tower where Emberwing had made her temporary nest. Sera was sitting on the marble floor, her back against the warm wall when he entered. "I've been looking for you," he said, concern evident in his voice. "Morgana said you were upset." "Did she also tell you why?" Sera asked, not looking at him. "She said you found the forbidden archives, that Lucian filled your head with warnings about the binding ritual." Daemon sat beside her, careful to maintain a respectful distance. "Sera, I need you to understand. Is it true?" She turned to face him. "The binding ritual, will it fuse our souls together permanently?" He was silent for a long moment. "Yes," he finally said. "It's called the Covenant of Light and Shadow. It's ancient magic, older than either of our houses. And yes, once completed, it can't be undone." "And you were planning to tell me this when?" "Before the ritual," Daemon said. "I wouldn't have let you enter into it without knowing exactly what it meant. But you were going to ask me to do it, to permanently bind myself to you." Sera's voice rose. "We've known each other for a day, Daemon. 1 day." "I know," his voice was raw. "I know it's insane, but the prophecy—" "Damn the prophecy." Sera stood, pacing. "I'm not some magical tool to be used in your court's machinations. I'm a person. I have dreams, desires, a life beyond this political theater." "You think I don't know that?" Daemon rose as well, his composure finally cracking. "You think I want this? To trap someone who barely knows me into an eternal bond? I've spent 3 months wrestling with this, Seraphine. 3 months trying to find another way." "And?" "There isn't one." The defeat in his voice stopped her pacing. "I've consulted every expert, read every book, explored every option. The prophecy is clear. Only the union of our house's powers can prevent the coming darkness, and the binding ritual is the only way to fully merge those powers." "Then we're both trapped," Sera said quietly. "Yes." They stood in silence, the weight of fate pressing down on them. Emberwing trilled softly from her nest, a sound of sympathy. "What if we run?" Sera asked suddenly. "What if we just leave, let them find another way?" "Then millions die," Daemon said bluntly. "The darkness in the prophecy isn't metaphorical, Sera. It's real. The seer showed me the vision, a plague of shadow creatures born from the rift between our houses, feeding on fear and hatred. They're already stirring in the deep places of the world. We have perhaps 6 months before they break free." "And you believe this, completely?" "I've seen the evidence.
Daemon moved to the window, staring out at the twilight landscape. Strange deaths in the border territories, animals behaving strangely. The shadow drakes are restless, sensing something wrong. My scouts report darkness spreading in the whispering woods, places where light no longer penetrates. He turned back to her. I wish it were a lie, Sera. I truly do. Sera sank down onto a bench, her mind racing. Emberwing hopped over, nuzzling against her hand. What do I do, girl? How do I choose between my freedom and my heart, between my desires and my duty? Emberwing trilled softly, then laid her head on Sera's lap, and in that moment, Sera understood. A phoenix chose its rider once in a lifetime. That bond was eternal, unbreakable, and yet it was the freest thing in the world because it was chosen with full knowledge and open eyes. Maybe the binding ritual could be the same. Maybe.
Chapter 6: The Gathering Storm. The next 3 days passed in a blur of formal meetings, court etiquette, and stolen moments with Daemon. He showed her the palace library, where books of both light and shadow magic stood side by side. They walked in the twilight gardens, where flowers bloomed that existed nowhere else in the world, some that only opened in darkness, others that glowed with inner light. They flew together, her on Emberwing, him on Nethys, soaring through the perpetual dusk of the Shadowlands. With each conversation, each shared silence, Sera felt her decision crystallizing. It wasn't about the prophecy anymore, or even about duty. It was about the man who spoke to his shadow drake with gentle respect, who remembered the names of servants, who stayed up late working on policies to improve his people's lives. It was about the way he looked at her, not as a political tool, but as someone precious. But doubt lingered, especially when Lady Morgana watched them with her calculating eyes, or when Lucian appeared with new warnings about the dangers of the ritual. On the third night, Sera couldn't sleep. She wandered the corridors until she found herself in the Hall of Mirrors, a gallery where enchanted mirrors showed not reflections, but possibilities. She paused before one and gasped. The mirror showed her a future, she and Daemon, older, standing together before a united kingdom. They wore crowns that blended light and shadow, and their hands were clasped. But their faces, they looked happy, genuinely happy. "Beautiful, isn't it?" said a voice behind her. Sera spun to find the court seer, an ancient woman with milky eyes that somehow saw everything. She'd been introduced at the feast, but had said little since. "These mirrors show possibility, not certainty. That future can be yours, or you can choose another path." She gestured to a different mirror. This one showed Sera alone, flying on Emberwing across golden fields. She looked free, unburdened, and utterly alone. "Every choice has a cost," Sera said gently. "The question is, which price are you willing to pay?" "Why did you give the prophecy? If you can see the future, why not just tell us exactly what to do?" "Because the future is written by choices, not fate," the seer replied. "I saw the darkness coming, yes, and I saw that only your union could stop it. But how you choose to unite, why you choose it, that's yours to decide. A binding born of resentment will fail. One born of genuine connection might just save us all." "And if I choose wrong?" "There is no wrong choice, child, only different paths." The seer touched Sera's cheek with a withered hand. "But I will tell you this. I have seen many futures, many possibilities, and in the ones where you and Prince Daemon face the darkness together, bound by choice rather than compulsion, those are the futures where love blooms. Not immediately, perhaps, but with time, with trust, with shared trials." She smiled. "The brightest fires are born from the deepest shadows." She disappeared as mysteriously as she'd come, leaving Sera alone with the mirrors in her thoughts.
The next morning, the day before the convergence, Sera made her decision. She found Daemon in his study, surrounded by maps and reports. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. "You're not sleeping," she observed. "Neither are you, apparently." He set down his quill. "Sera, if you're come to tell me your decision, I'll do it. The binding ritual. I choose yes." The silence that followed was deafening. Daemon stared at her, searching her face. "Are you certain? Because once we begin, I know the consequences. I've thought about nothing else for 3 days." She moved closer. "But I need to know something first. When you look at me, what do you see? A prophecy? A solution to your problems? Or something more?" Daemon stood slowly, moving around the desk until only a few feet separated them. "I see someone brilliant," he said quietly. "Someone brave enough to walk into an enemy stronghold with nothing but a phoenix and hope. Someone who speaks their mind, who doesn't play political games, who makes me laugh when I've forgotten how." He paused. "I see someone I could love, given time. Someone I might already be starting to love, if I'm honest." Sera's breath hitched. "That's a dangerous admission." "Everything about this is dangerous." He reached for her hand. "But I'd rather face danger with you than safety with anyone else." She stepped into his space, close enough to feel his warmth. "Then kiss me," she said, "not because of prophecy or duty, because you want to." For a heartbeat, he hesitated. Then he cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was gentle first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of what they were beginning. But then Sera leaned into him and the kiss deepened. She felt his power beneath his skin, shadow magic that responded to her fire. It was intoxicating, terrifying, and absolutely right. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "I should have asked permission," Daemon said, his voice rough. "I literally just told you to kiss me." "Still, consent is important, even in—" He stopped as she laughed. "What?" "You're possibly the most proper revolutionary prince I've ever met." "You've met a lot of revolutionary princes?" "Just the one, but he's setting a high standard." They stood together, foreheads touching, hands clasped. Outside, Emberwing and Nethys flew in synchronized patterns, practicing for the ritual. "Tomorrow night, the convergence. Are you frightened?" "Terrified," Sera admitted, "but not of the binding, of what comes after. The darkness, the battle, the weight of kingdoms on our shoulders." "We'll face it together." "Promise me something," Sera said. "Promise that even when duty weighs heavy, even when the kingdom demands everything, we'll remember this moment, the choice we made freely." "I promise." He kissed her forehead. "Now, come, there's someone you need to meet." He led her through the palace to a tower she hadn't yet explored. At its peak was a chamber filled with crystalline structures that hummed with power. "The convergence chamber," Daemon explained. "This is where the ritual will take place, but that's not why I brought you here." He gestured, and a figure emerged from the shadows, a woman in robes of twilight blue, her hair silver white, her eyes ancient. "This is High Priestess Lyanna," Daemon said. "She'll conduct the ritual, but more importantly, she's agreed to answer any questions you have about the binding, without political filters." Over the next hour, Lyanna explained the ritual in detail. She spoke of the history of such bindings, of the risks and rewards. She confirmed what Lucian had said about the permanency, but also spoke of the strength that comes from such unions, not just magical power, but emotional resilience. "The binding will amplify everything between you. Joy will be brighter, sorrow deeper. You'll never truly be alone, which is both blessing and curse. But if you choose this with open eyes and willing hearts, it can be the foundation of something remarkable." "And if we don't fit? If we discover we're incompatible?" "Then you'll spend eternity learning to fit," she said bluntly. "This is not a decision to make lightly, but I have spoken with both of you separately, observed you together. I believe you have what it takes to build something strong." That evening, there was a pre-ritual feast. Unlike the grand spectacle of Sera's first night, this was intimate, just close friends and family. Lucian was there, subdued but present, and Lady Morgana attended, her expression unreadable. And Aldrich had traveled from the sunlit provinces to stand as Sera's witness. "You're sure about this, little bird?" Aldrich asked quietly. "No," Sera admitted, "but I'm sure about him, and sometimes that's enough." "He's a good man," Aldrich said. "I've done my research. The rumors of cruelty are exaggerated, mostly spread by his enemies. The truth is simpler. He's a prince who puts his people first, even at personal cost." He squeezed her shoulder. "You'll be happy with him, I think, once both of you stop being so afraid." As night fell, Daemon found her again. They walked through the gardens, not speaking much, just being together. Emberwing and Nethys flew in synchronized patterns, practicing for the ritual. "Tomorrow," Daemon said, "the convergence. Are you frightened?" "Terrified," Sera admitted, "but not of the binding, of what comes after. The darkness, the battle, the weight of kingdoms on our shoulders. We'll face it together." "Promise me something," Sera said. "Promise that even when duty weighs heavy, even when the kingdom demands everything, we'll remember this moment, the choice we made freely." "I promise." He kissed her forehead. "Now, come, there's someone you need to meet."
"Last chance to run," Daemon said, only half joking. "Last chance for you to back out," Sera countered. "Not a chance." He pulled her close, holding her under the stars. "Tomorrow, we change everything." "Tomorrow," she agreed. And in the morning, as the sun began its slow climb toward the convergence point, Sera prepared for the ritual that would bind her soul to Daemon's forever. Chapter 7. The Binding. The convergence chamber was transformed. Crystalline pillars glowed with inner light, creating patterns that shifted between shadow and radiance. The floor was inlaid with symbols from both their houses, sun and moon, fire and darkness, intertwined in an eternal dance. Sera wore a gown of white and gold that seemed to hold the light of dawn. Daemon was dressed in midnight blue with silver thread, looking every inch the Shadow Prince. They stood at opposite ends of the chamber as High Priestess Lyanna began the ceremony. "We gather at the moment of balance, when the sun and moon share the sky in perfect harmony. Fire and shadow, light and darkness. Today these elements will merge through the souls of two who have chosen to walk as one." Above them, through the crystal dome, they could see the astronomical event beginning. The sun and moon were approaching alignment, creating an eclipse unlike any other, neither total darkness nor full light, but a shimmering twilight. "Princess Seraphine of House Luminous, do you come to this binding of your own free will?" "I do," Sera said, her voice clear and strong. "Prince Daemon of House Nocturne, do you come to this binding of your own free will?" "I do," Daemon replied. "Then approach the circle of unity." They walked toward the center of the chamber, where a circular platform awaited them. As they stepped onto it, the crystals around them began to sing, a harmonic resonance that vibrated in their bones. "Join hands," Lyanna instructed. Sera and Daemon faced each other, their hands clasping. The moment they touched, power flared, her fire magic responding to his shadow magic, creating sparks that danced between their joined hands. "The binding requires 3 elements," Lyanna continued. "First, the offering of power. Daemon, Prince of Shadows, what do you offer to your bonded?" Daemon's eyes never left Sera's face. "I offer my shadow magic, my protection, and my strength. I offer my truth, however dark it may be. I offer my heart, however scarred, and I swear to honor her light, never to dim it, never to cage it." Sera felt his magic flowing toward her, cool and vast, like a midnight ocean. It should have been frightening, but instead it felt like coming home to a place she'd never known she was missing. "Seraphine, Phoenix Rider, what do you offer to your bonded?" "I offer my fire magic, my courage, and my hope," Sera said. "I offer my honesty, however bright it burns. I offer my heart, however vulnerable, and I swear to honor his darkness, not as something to be feared, but as strength and depth." Her magic flowed toward Daemon, warm and brilliant. She saw his eyes widen as it touched him, saw the wonder in his face. "The second element is the bond of creatures," Lyanna said. "Let the phoenix and the shadow drake complete their union." Emberwing and Nethys descended from above, landing on specially prepared perches on either side of the platform. The two creatures moved together, touching beaks, and a pulse of combined power rippled through the chamber. "And the third element," Lyanna said, her voice rising, "is the choice, not made in haste, not made in fear, but made in full knowledge of the consequences. Daemon and Seraphine, do you choose this binding, knowing it cannot be undone? Do you choose to face whatever darkness comes, united in purpose and power?" "I choose this," Daemon said. "I choose this," Sera echoed. Above them, the convergence reached its peak. Sun and moon aligned perfectly, and the chamber exploded with light and shadow. The binding hit them like a tidal wave. Sera gasped as Daemon's presence flooded her senses. She felt his emotions, his fear, his hope, his fierce protective love that he'd been hiding. She felt the weight of responsibility he carried, the loneliness he'd endured, the desperate desire to be worthy of her trust. And he felt her in return. She knew it from the way his hands tightened on hers, from the sharp intake of his breath. He was experiencing her courage, her doubts, her growing affection for him, and beneath it all, the fierce fire that defined her. Their magics merged. Fire and shadow wove together, creating something entirely new. Twilight magic, born of both light and darkness. It was more powerful than either element alone, and infinitely more complex. The chamber whirled around them. Lyanna's voice seemed to come from far away. "The binding is complete. Fire and shadow are one. Let none tear asunder what magic and choice have joined." Slowly the power settled. Sera found herself leaning against Daemon, his arms around her, both of them trembling with the aftermath of the ritual. "I can feel you," Daemon whispered against her hair. "Your heartbeat, your emotions, everything. It's overwhelming." "I know," Sera said. "I feel you too. It's like I've been incomplete all my life, and I didn't know until now." They stayed like that for a long moment, adjusting to their new reality. Then Lyanna approached, a smile on her usually stern face. "You've done well. The binding is strong and true. Now comes the hard part, learning to live with it." The celebration that followed was subdued. Everyone could feel that something had changed, something fundamental. Sera and Daemon couldn't stand too far apart without feeling a pull toward each other. Their emotions bled together, requiring conscious effort to separate self from other. But there was beauty in it too. When Daemon smiled, Sera felt his joy as if it were her own. When she laughed, he experienced her delight. They were learning a new language of shared existence. Late that night, they stood together on the balcony outside Sera's chambers. The twilight had deepened, stars emerging in the darkened sky. "No going back now," Daemon said softly. "Would you want to?" Sera asked. He turned to her, and in his eyes she saw, felt the truth. "No. This is terrifying and wonderful and completely insane. But no, I wouldn't undo this if I could." "Good," Sera said, "because neither would I." He drew her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his heart, a rhythm that now matched her own. Emberwing and Nethys perched together on the railing, the phoenix's fire casting warm light on the shadow drake's scales. "The darkness is still coming," Daemon reminded her. "Tomorrow we start preparing for war." "I know," Sera lifted her head to look at him. "But tonight, can we just be
Just for tonight, before duty calls? What did you have in mind? She smiled. Take me flying. I want to see your realm through your eyes, through our bond. They flew for hours, Sera on Emberwing, Daemon on Nethys, soaring through the Shadowlands, and through their bond, Sera experienced what Daemon felt for his land, the love, the fierce protectiveness, the pride in its dark beauty. He shared with her the memories of childhood flights, the first time he'd bonded with Nethys, the secret places he'd discovered. And she shared her own memories in return, the golden fields of her homeland, the first time Emberwing had chosen her, the joy of soaring through sunlight. When they finally returned to the palace, exhausted and exhilarated, they stood at the entrance of her chambers. I should let you rest, Daemon said, though neither of them moved to separate. Stay, Sera impulsively said, just to talk, to adjust to this together. He nodded, and they went inside. They sat together on the balcony, talking through the night about everything and nothing, their fears, their hopes, their plans for the kingdom. As dawn approached, Sera found herself curled against him, his arms around her, both of them drifting toward sleep. Daemon, she murmured. I think I'm falling in love with you. He felt his sharp intake of breath, felt his heart race through their bond. I know I'm falling in love with you. I tried not to. I thought it would make the binding easier if I kept the distance, but you're impossible not to love. She tilted her head up to kiss him, and this time there was no hesitation, no fear, just certainty and warmth and the promise of everything to come.
Chapter 8. Shadows Rising. The first attack came 3 days after the binding. Sera was in the training yard, practicing combat magic with Daemon when the screams started. They both felt it through their bond, terror spreading like wildfire through the palace. They ran to the eastern wall and saw it. Shadow creatures boiling up from the ground, formless masses of darkness with too many teeth and eyes that glowed with hunger. The palace guards were fighting, but their weapons passed through the creatures without effect. The darkness from the prophecy, Daemon said, his voice grim. It's beginning. Can we fight them? Sera asked, already calling Emberwing. Not with conventional weapons, but maybe. He looked at her, and she felt his idea through their bond before he spoke it. Our magic, together. They'd been practicing since the binding, learning to weave their powers deliberately, rather than just feeling each other's emotions. Now they put that practice to use. Sera summoned her fire magic, bright and hot. Daemon called forth his shadow magic, deep and vast, and where their powers met, something new emerged. Twilight magic that burned with cold fire, that illuminated and concealed simultaneously. They directed it at the creatures. The twilight magic struck like lightning, and where it hit, the shadow beasts dissolved, shrieking in tones that hurt to hear. It's working, Sera cried. But more creatures were emerging, dozens, then hundreds, pouring from rifts in reality itself. Even with their combined power, Sera and Daemon couldn't be everywhere at once. Emberwing, Sera called. The wards, strengthen the palace wards. The phoenix understood. She and Nethys took flight, circling the palace, their combined magic reinforcing the protective barriers that had stood for centuries. Behind those wards, the shadow creatures couldn't pass. But the battle had shown them the truth. The darkness was rising faster than anticipated. They had perhaps weeks, not months, before it overwhelmed everything. That night, the War Council convened. Daemon and Sera sat at the head of the table, surrounded by generals, mages, and advisors from both houses. Even Lady Morgana was present, her earlier hostility replaced with grim pragmatism. We need to find the source, Lady Morgana said. These creatures aren't spontaneous. Something is summoning them, feeding them. The Whispering Woods, suggested General Thrace, a grizzled veteran. That's where the darkness is strongest. Then we go there, Daemon said. Tomorrow, we find the source and destroy it. With respect, Your Highness, Thrace said, you and Princess Seraphine are too valuable to risk on a scouting mission.
We're the only ones who can fight these creatures effectively, Sera countered. Our bond gives us power neither of us had alone. If we stay behind castle walls while our people die, what good is that power? The debate raged for hours. Finally, a compromise was reached. They would lead a small, elite team into the Whispering Woods, supported by both fire mages from House Luminous and shadow mages from House Nocturne. Emberwing and a flight of shadow drakes would provide aerial support. As the council dispersed, Lucian approached them. He'd been quiet during the meeting, uncharacteristically sober. "I'm coming with you," Lucian said. "Don't," Daemon began. "Don't," Lucian held up a hand. "I know I've been difficult, but this is real, and I won't hide while you two face it. Besides," he smiled weakly, "someone needs to watch your backs. You're so busy gazing into each other's eyes, you might miss a killer shadow beast." Despite everything, Sera laughed. "Thank you, Lucian." "Don't thank me yet. I might still get us all killed."
The expedition departed at dawn. 20 warriors, 10 mages, Sera and Daemon at the lead, with Emberwing and Nethys flying overhead. The Whispering Woods lay 2 days' journey from Midnight Spire, across landscapes that grew increasingly blighted as they traveled. Through their bond, Sera felt Daemon's worry for his people, his determination to end this threat, and he felt her resolve, her fierce protective instinct extending now not just to her phoenix, but to him, to their joined houses, to the future they were fighting for. On the second night, camped on the edge of the Whispering Woods, Sera couldn't sleep. She slipped out of her tent and found Daemon standing watch, staring into the dark trees. "Can't rest either?" she asked, joining him. "Too much to think about." He put his arm around her, and she leaned into his warmth. "Sera, if something happens tomorrow—" "Don't," she said. "We're bonded now, remember? We face this together and we survive together." "Or we die together," he said quietly. "The binding works both ways. If one of us falls, then we'd better make sure neither of us falls." She turned to face him. "I refuse to lose you now, Daemon. I've just started to understand what we could be." He kissed her then, fierce and desperate, pouring all his fear and love through their bond. She kissed him back with equal intensity, knowing that tomorrow they might face death, wanting him to know, to feel through their connection, that she had no regrets. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Come back to my tent," Sera said. "I don't want to be apart tonight." They lay together under the stars, Daemon's arms around her, talking in whispers about everything, their childhoods, their dreams, the kingdom they hoped to build. As dawn approached, Sera realized she wasn't afraid anymore. Whatever came, they would face it together. Chapter 9: Heart of Darkness. The Whispering Woods lived up to their name. The trees themselves seemed to speak, their branches creating sounds that were almost words. As the expedition moved deeper, the darkness grew thicker, almost tangible. "Stay close," Daemon warned through their bond. "Something's watching us." Sera felt it too, malevolent attention, focused and hungry. Emberwing flew lower, her fire providing light in the oppressive gloom. They found the source in a clearing at the wood's heart, a rift in reality itself, a tear in the fabric of the world from which shadow creatures poured in an endless stream. And standing before it, channeling power into the rift, was a figure in black robes. "Morgana!" Daemon's voice was a shocked whisper. The advisor turned, and her smile was terrible. "I wondered how long it would take you to figure it out." "You're summoning the darkness?" Sera couldn't believe it. "But why?" "Because the prophecy was wrong. Or rather, I interpreted it differently. The darkness doesn't seek to destroy, it seeks to transform, to create a new world where power isn't divided between light and shadow, but unified under those strong enough to wield both." She gestured to the rift. "I've been feeding this portal for months, waiting for your binding to provide the final catalyst." "You wanted us to bind?" Daemon asked.
Of course, your union created a surge of twilight magic powerful enough to fully open the gateway, and now, with you conveniently here, I can drain that power and become the first true twilight sovereign." Her eyes glittered with madness. "You should thank me. You'll go down in history as the martyrs who saved the kingdom." "Over my dead body," Lucian snarled, stepping forward. "That can be arranged," Morgana said, and unleashed a wave of dark magic. The battle erupted in chaos. Shadow creatures flooded the clearing, while Morgana's magic lashed out at anyone who approached. The guards and mages fought valiantly, but they were overwhelmed. Sera and Daemon stood back to back, their twilight magic blazing as they cut through the creatures, but for everyone they destroyed, 3 more emerged from the rift. "We have to close the portal," Sera shouted over the din. "I know," Daemon blocked another attack, "but Morgana's power is sustaining it. We'd need to break her concentration." Through their bond, an idea formed. Risky, possibly suicidal, but it might work. "Together," they said simultaneously. They reached for their deepest reserves of power. Sera called upon every ember of fire magic in her soul. Daemon drew on shadows from the darkest corners of his being, and they wove it all together, creating a surge of twilight magic so bright and dark simultaneously that it seemed to tear reality itself. They directed it not at Morgana, but at the rift. The portal shuddered. Morgana screamed, feeling her control slipping. "No! You'll destroy everything!" "Good!" Sera and Daemon shouted together. The twilight magic struck the rift like a lance, and the portal began to collapse. Shadow creatures were sucked back through, shrieking. The very air crackled with power as 2 realities fought for dominance. Morgana, desperate, threw one final spell, not at them, but at Lucian, who was closest to her. "No!" Daemon's bond sense warned him a split second before it happened. He threw himself in front of his brother, taking the killing blow full in the chest. Sera felt it through the bond, the explosion of pain, the sudden darkness. She screamed, feeling herself being pulled down with him. The binding meant his death would be hers as well. But in that moment, Emberwing and Nethys acted in perfect harmony. They dove from the sky, their combined magic pouring into Sera and Daemon, lending them strength, life force, the bond between Phoenix and Shadow Drake reinforcing the bond between their riders. It was enough, barely. Daemon's wound began to heal, knitting together with Phoenix fire. And in that moment of distraction, Morgana lost her last thread of control over the rift. The portal imploded, taking her with it. Her scream echoed across dimensions as she was pulled into the darkness she'd tried to control, lost forever in the space between worlds. The clearing fell silent. The shadow creatures were gone. The oppressive darkness lifted, and real sunlight broke through the canopy for the first time in who knew how long. Sera cradled Daemon in her arms, feeling his heartbeat grow stronger through their bond. "Don't you ever do that again," she sobbed. "I had to. Couldn't let Lucian, couldn't let anyone. You heroic idiot." She kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his lips. "You magnificent, self-sacrificing idiot." Around them, the survivors were picking themselves up. Lucian knelt beside them, tears streaming down his face. "Brother, I'm so sorry for everything." "Family," Daemon said simply. "That's what you do for family." The journey back to Midnight Spire took longer than the journey out. They had wounded to tend, and Daemon needed time to fully recover. But as they traveled, they could see the land already beginning to heal. The shadow blight was receding, and in its place, natural growth was returning. The prophecy had been fulfilled, though not in the way anyone expected. Fire and shadow united had indeed saved the kingdom, not through conquest or domination, but through sacrifice and love. Epilogue: A New Dawn. 6 months later, Sera stood on the balcony of their shared chambers, watching the sun rise over a united kingdom. Daemon came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Too excited. She leaned back against him. The coronation is today. They were to be crowned together, not as separate rulers of divided houses, but as the joint sovereigns of a reunited Aurelia. It had taken months of negotiation, of bringing together the sunlit provinces and the Shadowlands, but they'd done it. Nervous? Daemon asked. Terrified, Sera admitted. But I have you. That makes all the difference. Through their bond, she felt his love, his pride, his gratitude that fate had brought them together. And she sent her own feelings in return, the love that had grown from those first uncertain days to something deep and unshakable. Emberwing and Nethys were perched together on their special stand, grooming each other's feathers and scales. The phoenix had laid an egg a month ago, the first phoenix egg in 3 generations, now glowing softly with twilight colors that suggested something entirely new would emerge. "Do you ever regret it?" Sera asked softly. "The binding? The loss of independence?" Daemon was quiet for a moment, considering. "No," he said finally. "I won't lie and say it's always easy. Having someone always in your head, feeling your emotions, knowing your thoughts, it's intense. But, Sera," he turned her to face him, "you make me better, more patient, more hopeful. You balance my darkness with your light. And you give my fire purpose, direction. You make me think before I act. We're a good team. The best." They kissed as the sun fully rose, gilding the world in gold and casting long shadows, a perfect balance of light and dark. Below, in the palace courtyard, preparations were underway for the coronation. Representatives from both houses worked side by side, decorating with flowers that bloomed in both sunlight and shadow. The unified guards, wearing the new royal livery of twilight blue and gold, practiced their formations. And watching it all with satisfaction was Lucian, who had surprised everyone by becoming one of their most effective ambassadors. He'd stopped drinking, started training, and had discovered a talent for diplomacy that nobody suspected. He'd even begun courting a young woman from the sunlit provinces, much to his brother's delight. "Ready to become a king?" Sera asked, adjusting Daemon's ceremonial cloak. "Ready to become a king with you as my queen," he corrected. "There's a difference." The coronation was everything they'd hoped for. Representatives from every province, every house, every corner of the kingdom gathered to witness the moment. When the twin crowns, one of sunlight, one of shadow, were placed on their heads, the crowd erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the palace walls. "Long live the twilight sovereigns! Long may they reign!" That night, after the ceremonies and celebrations, Sera and Daemon stood once more on their balcony. The kingdom spread before them, peaceful at last. "We did it," Sera whispered. "We're still doing it. This is just the beginning. We have a kingdom to rebuild, a peace to maintain, people to serve." "I know," she smiled up at him, "but we'll do it together, fire and shadow united. Light and darkness balanced," he agreed. And far above them, Emberwing and Nethys flew in perfect formation, leaving trails of crimson fire and purple shadow across the starlit sky, a living symbol of the new age that had begun. The prophecy had spoken of darkness and destruction, but it had also hinted at hope, and in choosing love over fear, unity over division, Sera and Daemon had proven that even the darkest prophecy could be transformed by the light of human connection. Their story was far from over. There would be challenges ahead, disagreements, difficulties. The binding meant they would feel every hurt, every frustration, every moment of doubt. But it also meant they would share every joy, every triumph, every moment of love. And in a world where magic was real and phoenixes could choose their riders, that seemed like the greatest magic of all. Two souls, once divided by destiny, now united by choice. Together, they would rule a kingdom of twilight, where fire and shadow danced in eternal harmony, where light and darkness were not enemies, but partners, where two houses once at war had become one family.
And when historians wrote of this age in the years to come, they would speak of the Twilight Sovereigns, the Phoenix Princess, and the Shadow Prince, who proved that the strongest bonds are not those forced by fate, but those chosen freely in full knowledge of the cost. For love, they would write, is the most powerful magic of all. The end.